Hey, what's going on, guys? Kalamazi here, and today I want to talk a bit about the 3 new essences that DPS have access to in 8.3 and their applications as a whole. Now, I do apologize if I sound a bit off this week as well, but I'm sick with what I'm hoping is just a cold and not the actual flu. Now, with Christmas, New Year's, and 8.3's launch fast approaching, however, I wanted to get this video out before I jump headfirst into the 8.3 guides that I have planned coming out early next year. If you guys see any weak auras or add-ons throughout the video and are interested in acquiring any of them, you can find a link to my Twitch in the description and grab them there. Now, the 3 new essences for DPS in 8.3 are called Spark of Inspiration, Breath of the Dying, and the Formless Void, although technically the Formless Void can be used by other roles as well. Each essence has some unique interactions with certain abilities or other essences, and each also bring with it a passive 10% corruption resistance, which is bigger than it actually seems. The first few weeks of 8.3 and Ny'alotha have the potential to be pretty taxing when it comes to the new corrupted gear available to us. Even though the corrupted effects are RNG, there's a lot of min-maxing and optimization to be had with the new system. We also need to take into account that our legendary cloak will grow in power later on through visions, but won't provide a whole lot of resistance early on. Being able to negate 10 corruption is pretty powerful, especially if you get lucky and receive multiple corrupted pieces of gear early on with the right effect. Even later into progression and farm, the bonus resistance is nice to have around, which allows for further optimization, and if the essence is also strong damage-wise, is even better. Let's look a bit more into the 3 new essences, starting with Spark of Inspiration. Spark of Inspiration is acquired from the new Horrific Visions coming in 8.3, and its major effect has a 1-minute cooldown, which increases the damage all party members within 15 yards deal with Azerite essences by 45% for 20 seconds, as well as granting a small speed increase. The minor side gives your spells and abilities a chance to increase you and 2 other allies' haste by a certain amount for 8 seconds, while also reducing the cooldown of you and 2 other allies' major essence by 1 second. This is a very interesting essence in itself due to the fact that it does not provide the user with any real damage-based effect or increase, such as focusing Iris, Crucible Flame, or Condensed Life Force do, to name a few. Spark of Inspiration instead buffs you and your party members' essence-based damage, so it's a support-based essence in a sense. Now, I have to say that buffing only party members' essences and not the entire raid group might make it seem like a pretty poor choice, but with it being at a 1-minute CD, I think it's necessary. You also have the option of technically stacking the remaining 4 party slots with members who are running damage-based major or minor essences as well to further benefit from its short cooldown. I can also confirm through testing that it does indeed buff minor essence damage procs like Crucible Flame and Breath of the Dying, while it's currently active as well, which gives its essence a bit more potential. As the tooltip says, the minor does seem to have about 3 to 4 procs per minute, which amounts to roughly 10 seconds off of a Condensed Life Force major just from your own procs. If nearby allies are also running the minor, then you can most likely count on a few additional seconds to be removed from your major CD, but it entirely depends on who, if anyone, is running Spark of Inspiration as a minor. Relying on your own procs for roughly a 10-second CD reduction on a 3-minute CD at that is not very impressive. If most of your raid group is running the essence, however, then things really start to get interesting when it comes to CD reductions. Then again, I do feel that most of Spark's potential comes from its major usage as a support essence of sorts. I'm very interested in seeing if it becomes the best choice for certain party members in a raid setting once we get closer to Ny'alotha's launch and when tuning is done. The real question though is, seeing as how the essence can only technically be worn by DPS, and we'll get to more of that later on in the video, who is going to take the DPS loss and wear it for the betterment of the raid group? Breath of the Dying is the other DPS-only essence arriving in 8.3, and it's acquired through gaining reputation with the Oldham Accord, which is one of the new reputations in Visions of Ny'alotha. Its major side has a short cooldown in 45 seconds that can be reduced even further. The on-use burns your target with Azerite, dealing fire damage, and if the target has less than 20% health or more than 80% health, the cooldown is reduced by a massive 30 seconds. There's also the part about it killing an enemy, thus further reducing its CD and dealing 100% more damage, but I don't think we'll see a whole lot of that in raid scenarios. If you are able to land the killing blow, however, then the essence gains even more raw value. The minor side of Breath brings with it a proc that deals a good bit of fire damage while also healing you for half the damage dealt. If the target is below 20%, however, the chance for extra damage is increased by a whopping 400%. This minor effect reminds me very much so of Crucible Flame's minor effect, without the RNG of it either stacking to 3 or just dropping off too early. The effect was also recently buffed to the form you're currently seeing now in this video, effectively doubling the damage each minor proc deals. Execute-based damage effects and bonuses have always been valuable over the course of WoW's history for a plethora of reasons. If we end up seeing a fight that has a very tight execute phase like Mythic Fallen Avatar, then this essence gains even more value. The real question we should be asking though, however, is how does Breath of the Dying stack up compared to something like Crucible Flame? Well, thankfully I have that answer for you. Here are some of the numbers from a few 3-minute DPS cycles that I ran on PTR post-buff. Lethal Strikes, which is Breath of the Dying's minor damage ability, dealt 6% of my total damage over a 3-minute fight, while Crucible of Flame dealt 4.2% of my damage. As mentioned, COF's damage can be RNG at times, so I ran one more 3-minute DPS cycle, and Lethal indeed did beat out COF once again, as you can see here. Now I want to emphasize as well that both of these tests were done outside of execute range for the full 3-minute cycle, so Breath of the Dying has even more room to grow damage-wise once you hit that sub 20% threshold. While there is still a bit of time left before 8.3 PTR goes down, Breath of the Dying is an essence that I certainly have my eye on for Ny'alotha and beyond, and depending on scaling, might end up being a very strong choice for the majority of DPS. Finally, we have the last essence, which technically every role can use, called the Formless Void. This essence is obtained through collecting encrypted Ny'alothian text from bosses inside Ny'alotha, similar to how Condensed Life Force was collected inside Eternal Palace. The major side replicates the energy in your target's Heart of Azeroth, gaining access to the rank 3 of the current major essence for 15 seconds. The Formless Void will then be on cooldown for 30% longer than the base CD of the replicated essence. This essence is really interesting, essentially allowing you to play with multiple major essences over the course of a fight. It's also worth noting that it brings the copied major essence's minor ability as well for its active duration. This essentially means that certain players, maybe say a healer, can rotate between using certain DPS-based essences in an earlier phase of the fight, then copying a healer essence later on when things are a bit more tense. The same can also be said for tanks trying to maximize DPS early on and survivability later. It's important to note here that this makes it so that roles which cannot choose certain essences, like healers taking Focusing Iris, can now do so. Just be aware of the 30% increased cooldown. Now, while I do think this mostly has healer and tank implications, if there is a fight in early Ny'alotha prog where healing is a real issue, DPS could technically copy other DPS cooldowns early on, and then copy healing/tank shield essences later when things become overwhelming. Another interesting interaction is that technically the option is there for tanks and healers to copy the Spark of Inspiration major as well, which even with a 30% longer cooldown would not be too hard to maintain when rotating through multiple players while staggering its use. With how Breath of the Dying is performing minor-wise, and how strong Crucible of Flame is for a large portion of the player base, I could easily see this being a strategy early on where there's a tight DPS requirement. With having 2 tanks and 3 to 5 healers present on mostly every fight barring niche scenarios, you would essentially have roughly a 50% uptime on the bonus damage effect if you were able to place a mix of 2 players in each group running said major essence, even taking the 30% increase CD into account. The only real downside to that is that one DPS in the raid would have to run Spark of Inspiration as their major to be the copy target. The minor side brings a proc that whenever an ally within 40 yards uses an essence, you gain a main stat and haste bonus for 20 seconds. The ally who used the essence also gains a bit of haste as well, which is a nice added bonus. The main stat proc sadly does not stack with other active buffs whenever someone else uses their essence, but it does refresh, which can lead to some pretty extensive chained buff sequences with major essences that have a short CD, like Crucible of Flame as well. One thing's for sure, and that is that the Formless Void essence really opens the door for some unique and innovative CD/essence usage in 8.3. The fact that it allows healers, tanks, and even DPS at times to use essences that aren't intended to be used by them will hopefully lead to some unique strategies being implemented by guilds pushing for kills early on. I myself am excited to have a pseudo-execute essence around in Breath of the Dying, and with how strong Breath currently looks, hope to use it throughout most of progression. Let me know what you thought of the new essences and which one is your favorite in the comment section below. If you're interested in any weak auras or add-ons you've seen here, feel free to hop over to my Twitch where you can acquire them all. If you guys want to see more WoW content, be sure to smash the subscribe button, and while you're down there, hit the like button as well. Thanks guys, and I'll see y'all on stream. Peace.